The cardboard box hit the marble floor with a hollow thud, spilling baby formula and diapers across the foyer of the mansion where she'd lived for 3 years. Rebecca stood frozen, her newborn twins screaming in her arms, as her husband David kicked another box toward her feet. Behind him, his mother Eleanor sneered with satisfaction. His sister Michelle filmed on her phone, and clinging to his arm like a parasite was the woman who destroyed everything, Vanessa, the company's VP of marketing, still wearing Rebecca's silk robe. "You have 30 minutes before I call security," David said, his voice cold as winter steel, "and take those brats with you." Rebecca's hands trembled as she clutched her 3-week-old son and daughter closer. The same hands that had typed reports until midnight, that had organized David's entire career, that had made him look competent enough to climb the corporate ladder at Meridian Global Industries, the very company where they all worked, the company that had just promoted David to senior director that morning. What none of them knew, what the lawyer's certified letter in Rebecca's diaper bag would reveal in exactly 48 hours, was that the billion-dollar empire they all served, the company that paid their salaries and funded their lavish lifestyles, now belonged entirely to her. Eleanor had already texted the family group chat about the divorce. Michelle had posted a vague Instagram story about toxic people being removed. David's father, Gregory, had called from his corner office to approve the decision. Even David's brother, Nathan, had sent a thumbs-up emoji, never questioning, never asking her side. But as Rebecca looked at their faces, smug, certain, united in their cruelty, as Vanessa's stiletto heels clicked closer and the woman actually spat in her face, none of them noticed the strange calm settling over Rebecca's features. None of them wondered why she stopped crying. None of them questioned why she simply wiped her cheek, picked up her babies, and walked out without a word. How could a family be so blind to the woman they were destroying? What had Rebecca really inherited from the grandmother they'd never bothered to meet? Why was David's entire career about to crumble? And what would happen when the entire family discovered that the wife they'd thrown out with their newborn twins now owned every brick, every contract, every stock option, every career they'd ever built, and what she planned to do would crush them so thoroughly they'd never recover? The inheritance they never saw coming. The rain had started the moment Rebecca stepped onto the sidewalk, as if the universe itself was weeping for her humiliation. She held Logan in her left arm and Lily in her right, their impossibly small bodies wrapped in blankets that were already getting damp. The diaper bag hung awkwardly from her elbow, growing heavier with each step. 3 weeks ago, she'd given birth to twins via emergency C-section. Her incision still ached. Her body still leaked and ached in ways the pregnancy books never mentioned. She'd barely slept more than 2 hours at a time since the babies arrived, and now she was homeless. Rebecca flagged down a taxi with the desperation of a woman who'd just lost everything. The driver, an older man with kind eyes, took one look at her, disheveled, crying, clutching 2 newborns, and didn't ask questions. He just helped her load the few boxes David had deigned to throw out after her, and drove to the only place she could think of, the extended stay motel on Route 7, where rooms rented by the week, and no one asked why a woman arrived with twins and tear-stained cheeks. The room smelled like industrial cleaner and old cigarettes. The wallpaper was peeling near the bathroom. The air conditioner rattled like it was dying, but it was hers, for now. Rebecca laid the twins on the bed, building a fortress of pillows around them, and finally let herself collapse. Not cry. She was too exhausted for tears now. Just collapse into the reality of what had happened. 4 years earlier, Rebecca had met David at Meridian Global's annual charity gala. She'd been 26, newly hired as a junior analyst in the finance department, wearing a dress she'd saved 3 months to afford. He'd been 31, charming, ambitious, working in business development with the kind of confidence that made people believe he was destined for greatness. "You're too smart to be stuck in finance," he told her that night, his hand on her lower back as they danced. "You should be running the company." She'd laughed, flattered by the attention of someone so polished, so sure of himself. David came from money, not billions, but enough that he'd never worried about making rent or choosing between groceries and gas. His family had connections, legacy admissions to good schools, vacation homes they called the Lake House, and the ski lodge. Rebecca had grown up in foster care. She'd put herself through community college, then state university, working 3 jobs and graduating with honors because education was her only way out. She'd learned early that people like David didn't usually notice people like her unless she made herself invaluable. So she did. She helped David with his presentations, making his ideas sharper, his data cleaner. She proofread his reports at midnight, attended his networking dinners, played the role of supportive girlfriend who made him look good. When he proposed after 8 months, she'd said yes because she'd never had a family before, and his seemed so perfect, so whole. Eleanor had smiled at the engagement party while whispering to her bridge club friends that David could have done better. Michelle had asked if Rebecca was pregnant, then seemed disappointed when she wasn't. Gregory had given David a firm handshake and told him, "Just make sure she signs a prenup." There was no prenup. David had been insulted by the suggestion. "You're going to be my wife," he'd said. "We're a team." Rebecca had believed him. The company they all served. Meridian Global Industries was a behemoth, a diversified holding company with subsidiaries in technology, real estate, manufacturing, and retail. Founded in 1952 by Thomas Meridian, it had grown from a single textile factory to a multi-billion-dollar empire spanning 14 countries. David worked in the Strategic Partnerships division. Eleanor was a consultant for their HR department. Gregory held a senior position in commercial real estate. Michelle did social media marketing for their consumer brands. Even Nathan, the family's black sheep, worked in their warehouse distribution center. The entire family drew their income, their status, their country club memberships, and luxury cars from Meridian Global. When people asked what they did, they said it with pride. "I work at Meridian." Rebecca worked there too in the data analytics department. After marrying David, she'd been promoted twice, though Eleanor constantly insinuated she'd only advanced because of her connection to the family. The truth was the opposite. Rebecca worked harder than anyone, staying late, volunteering for impossible projects, proving herself again and again. She'd never told anyone at Meridian about her grandmother, the grandmother they never met. Vivian Meridian had been a ghost in Rebecca's life for 26 years. Rebecca's mother, Catherine, had been Vivian's only child, the product of a brief, passionate affair with a married man. Vivian had raised Catherine alone, pouring her energy into building a business empire while her daughter grew up feeling neglected, invisible, second to board meetings and acquisition deals. Catherine had rebelled by getting pregnant at 17 with a man she barely knew. When she died of an overdose when Rebecca was 2, Vivian had made what she considered the practical choice. She'd placed her granddaughter in foster care. "I'm building an empire," Vivian had told her lawyer. "I can't raise another child. I failed the first time." Rebecca had grown up knowing her grandmother existed but had never met her, never received a birthday card, never got an explanation for why she wasn't wanted. The social workers had explained that sometimes families couldn't cope, that it wasn't personal, that Rebecca should focus on her future. So she had. She'd built herself from nothing, asking for nothing, expecting nothing. Until 3 weeks ago, when a lawyer named Arthur Whitmore had appeared at the hospital room where Rebecca was recovering from her C-section. The letter that changed everything. "Mrs. Rebecca Thompson," Arthur had said, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses, "I represent the estate of Vivian Meridian. I'm very sorry for your loss." Rebecca had been groggy from medication, trying to breastfeed 2 crying newborns. "I don't understand. Your grandmother passed away 6 weeks ago. I've been searching for you since then. She left very specific instructions in her will." David had been in the cafeteria, complaining about the hospital coffee. Eleanor and Michelle had gone home, saying the babies looked a bit yellow and they didn't want to catch anything. So Rebecca had been alone when Arthur explained. Vivian Meridian had spent her final years watching from a distance. She'd hired investigators to track Rebecca's life, her education, her marriage, her career. She'd seen how hard Rebecca worked, how David's family treated her, how she'd built herself despite having nothing. And Vivian had felt something she hadn't felt in decades: regret. She wanted to reach out, Arthur explained, but she was afraid. afraid you'd reject her, afraid it was too late, afraid she didn't deserve forgiveness. So she did the only thing she knew how to do. She built you a legacy. The will was 187 pages long. The summary was simple. Rebecca now owned 100% of Meridian Global Industries, along with all subsidiaries, properties, assets, and trusts. The company her entire husband's family worked for, the empire they'd spent their careers serving, belonged entirely to her. The inheritance was structured to transfer legally in 60 days, giving Rebecca time to recover from childbirth and make arrangements. Until then, it was confidential, locked behind legal documents and non-disclosure agreements. Don't tell anyone, Arthur had warned. Not yet. People change when money's involved. Wait until the transfer is complete and you've had time to understand what you're inheriting. Rebecca had nodded, overwhelmed, unable to process what it meant. That had been 3 weeks ago. Today, 57 days later, she was 3 days from taking control of everything. The day everything fell apart. Rebecca had suspected David was cheating for 2 months. The late nights at the office, the new cologne, the way he flinched when she touched his phone. But she just had twins. Her body was wrecked. She was leaking milk and bleeding and hadn't slept more than 90 minutes at a stretch. She'd convinced herself she was paranoid, that marriage was hard, that new parenthood strained everyone. Then this morning, she'd found Vanessa's earring in their bed. Not under the bed, not on the floor. In the bed, tangled in the sheets where Rebecca had been sleeping beside her husband while he texted another woman. She'd confronted David in the kitchen while Eleanor was visiting, while Michelle was upstairs posting Instagram stories, while the twins screamed in their bassinets. "You're being hysterical," David had said calmly, like he was addressing a confused child. "Vanessa is my colleague. That earring could have fallen out of her bag during a work meeting." "A work meeting in our bedroom?" Eleanor had stepped between them. "Rebecca, you've been impossible since the babies arrived. You're emotional, you're exhausted, you're clearly not thinking straight. My son has been nothing but patient with you." "Patient?" Rebecca had laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "I do everything. I cook, I clean. I take care of your grandchildren while he's out screwing his coworker." "How dare you speak to me that way?" Eleanor's face had flushed crimson. "After everything this family has done for you? You come from nothing. You have nothing. You are nothing without us." That's when Michelle had appeared, phone already recording. "This is insane. She's having a psychotic break." That's when Gregory had called, approving David's decision to handle the situation. That's when Vanessa had emerged from the master bedroom, Rebecca's bedroom, wearing Rebecca's robe, her hair still wet from Rebecca's shower. And that's when David had told her to pack her things and get out. The motel room revelation. Rebecca fed the twins, changed them, rocked them until they finally miraculously fell asleep in the center of the sagging motel bed. Then she pulled out her phone and called Arthur Whitmore. "They threw me out," she said quietly, "with my babies, his entire family. They all work at Meridian, and none of them know that in 3 days, I'll own everything." There was a long silence on the other end. Then Arthur said, "What would you like to do?" Rebecca thought about Eleanor's sneer, Michelle's phone recording her humiliation, Gregory's approval from his corner office, Nathan's thumbs up emoji, David's cold voice telling her to take those brats with her, Vanessa spitting in her face. "I want to wait," Rebecca said slowly. "I want the transfer to complete. I want to take control quietly, and then I want to make some changes." "What kind of changes?" Rebecca looked at her sleeping babies, thinking about the family they'd just been rejected by. The grandmother who'd built an empire out of regret, the foster kid who'd never been wanted. "The kind that ensures this never happens to anyone else," she said, "and the kind that makes very clear what happens when you underestimate someone because of where they came from." 3 days later, the transfer. On day 60, Rebecca sat in Arthur Whitmore's office while he walked her through the final documents. The twins were with a private nanny he'd arranged, a kind older woman named Patricia who'd raised 5 children and didn't blink at double duty. "Sign here, here, and here," Arthur said, sliding papers across his mahogany desk. "And it's done." Rebecca signed her name in 3 places. Just like that, she became the sole owner of Meridian Global Industries, with all its assets, subsidiaries, stocks, real estate, in 47,000 employees, including every single member of David's family. The board doesn't know yet, Arthur explained. Vivian structured the transfer to be confidential until you're ready to announce. Technically, they still think the company is owned by the Meridian Family Trust. They don't know the trust dissolved when Vivian died, or that you're her sole heir. How long can I keep it quiet? As long as you want, but once you start making executive decisions, people will figure it out quickly. Rebecca thought about this. I need to understand the company first. What each division does, who reports to whom, what projects are in development. I need to see everything. Arthur smiled. Your grandmother would have liked that. She always said the best leaders study before they act. The study phase. For 2 weeks, Rebecca did nothing but learn. She hired Patricia full-time to help with the twins, renting a modest apartment with the advance Arthur had provided against her inheritance. She spent every moment the baby slept reading reports, financial statements, HR files, and operational data. She learned that David's division, strategic partnerships, was underperforming. The big deals he'd been bragging about for years had mostly fallen through. His promotion to senior director had come after Eleanor lobbied Gregory, who'd lobbied the VP of Business Development, who'd agreed to move David up despite mediocre performance reviews. She learned that Michelle's social media campaigns had been flagged multiple times for inflated metrics and questionable ROI. The marketing department kept her on because Eleanor served as an HR consultant and had made it clear that Michelle was untouchable. She learned that Gregory's commercial real estate division had been involved in 3 questionable deals that had lost the company millions. An internal audit had recommended his removal, but the report had been buried. She learned that Nathan had multiple HR complaints for workplace harassment, but Eleanor had intervened each time, getting the complaints dismissed or the complainants quietly transferred. The entire family had built their careers on nepotism, favoritism, and the protection of people who shared their last name. But there was something else Rebecca discovered, something that made her blood run cold. Vanessa, the woman who destroyed her marriage, wasn't just David's mistress. She'd been systematically stealing clients, diverting deals to a company she'd secretly started with David. They'd been planning to leave Meridian Global together, taking proprietary information and client relationships, launching a competitor company with stolen intellectual property. The affair wasn't just about sex, it was about corporate espionage, and the launch date for their new company was in 3 weeks. The board meeting. Rebecca called an emergency board meeting for the following Monday. She didn't announce herself as owner, just as a representative of the Meridian estate with urgent business to discuss. The boardroom was exactly as Vivian had described in the letters Arthur had given Rebecca. Letters her grandmother had written but never sent, pouring out regrets and observations about the company she'd built. 12 board members sat around the table. Gregory was there, looking annoyed at being summoned by someone he didn't know. The CEO, Richard Davenport, looked curious. The CFO, the COO, the heads of all major divisions, they all waited. Rebecca walked in wearing a navy suit, her hair pulled back, her posture straight despite the exhaustion of caring for 3-week-old twins. Arthur followed, carrying a briefcase. Thank you for coming, Rebecca said quietly. I know this is unusual, but I have information that affects the future of this company. Gregory squinted at her. Do I know you? I'm Rebecca Thompson. I work in data analytics. I'm also your son's wife. Or I was, until he threw me out 2 weeks ago. The room went silent. I'm sorry, Richard said slowly, but I don't understand why personal matters warrant an emergency board meeting. Rebecca nodded to Arthur, who opened his briefcase and began distributing documents. These are ownership transfer papers, Rebecca explained. Vivian Meridian passed away 8 weeks ago. Her will left 100% of Meridian Global Industries to her sole heir, me. As of 2 weeks ago, I own this company entirely. I am now the majority shareholder, the controlling interest, and as of this moment, I'm exercising my right to address the board as owner. Gregory actually laughed. That's absurd. Vivian didn't have any heirs, and even if she did, my son would never have married. He stopped, his face going white as he looked at the documents. This is a forgery. It's not, Arthur said calmly. I've been Ms. Meridian's attorney for 30 years. Every document has been verified, notarized, and filed with the appropriate legal authorities. Rebecca is Vivian's granddaughter, and as of 14 days ago, she owns everything. The CFO was already reading the papers, her expression growing more shocked with each page. These are legitimate, she whispered. Rebecca let that sink in. Then she continued. I've spent the last 2 weeks reviewing company operations. What I've found is concerning. There's a pattern of nepotism, inflated performance reviews for connected employees, buried audit reports, and in at least one case, active corporate espionage. She pulled up a presentation on the screen, screenshots of David's emails, Vanessa's company registration documents, client lists that match Meridian's proprietary databases. David Thompson and Vanessa Martinez have been planning to leave Meridian Global and launch a competitor company using stolen client information and trade secrets. They've been siphoning opportunities for 6 months, setting up infrastructure, and preparing to announce their departure in 3 weeks. Gregory stood up, his chair scraping loudly. You spiteful little... This is revenge because my son left you. Your son didn't leave me, Rebecca said quietly. He and his entire family threw me out with our newborn twins because they thought I was worthless, because I came from nothing, because his mistress was more valuable than his wife. She looked around the table, meeting each board member's eyes. But I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because this company employs 47,000 people. Because Vivian spent 50 years building something that matters. Because I don't want it destroyed by people who think their last name makes them untouchable. Richard leaned forward. What are you proposing? The purge. Rebecca's proposal was simple. Terminate everyone involved in the espionage, remove employees who'd advanced through nepotism rather than merit, and implement new policies to ensure it never happened again. The board voted unanimously to support her. Within 48 hours, David received a termination notice. So did Vanessa. The legal department filed suit for corporate espionage, seeking damages and an injunction against their planned company launch. Gregory was offered early retirement after the buried audit reports came to light. He could leave with his pension intact or face an investigation into the failed deals. He took retirement. Eleanor's consulting contract wasn't renewed. Michelle's position was eliminated in a restructuring of the marketing department. Nathan was let go after HR reviewed the complaints that had been previously dismissed. All of it was legal. All of it was documented. All of it was the natural consequence of their own actions. Rebecca did it without anger, without drama, without revenge fantasies. She simply made the business decisions that needed to be made. The phone call, 3 days after the terminations, David called her. Rebecca was feeding Logan when her phone rang. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. You destroyed my life, David said. His voice was shaking, with rage or tears she couldn't tell. No, Rebecca said calmly, switching Logan to her other arm. You destroyed your own life. I just stopped protecting you from the consequences. We're family. How could you do this to family? Rebecca laughed, a real laugh this time, not the broken sound from 2 weeks ago. Family? Your mother called me nothing. Your sister filmed my humiliation for Instagram. Your father approved throwing me out while I was still bleeding from childbirth. Your brother sent a thumbs up emoji. And you? You brought your mistress into our bed, kicked me and our newborn children onto the street, and were planning to steal from the company to fund your affair. I loved you. You loved what I did for you. The reports I edited, the presentations I fixed, the way I made you look competent. You loved having someone beneath you, someone from nothing, someone who'd be grateful for whatever scraps you threw her. That's not, He couldn't finish. The espionage lawsuit will probably bankrupt you, Rebecca continued. The non-compete clause in your contract means you can't work in the industry for 2 years. Vanessa's already been offered immunity if she testifies against you, and from what my lawyers tell me, she's considering it. Your family's reputation is destroyed, and you did all of it to yourselves. Please, David said, and now he was definitely crying. Please, Rebecca, I'm sorry, I'll do anything. Just the twins. They're my children. Don't take them from me. Rebecca looked at Logan, his impossibly tiny fingers wrapped around her thumb as he drank. "You told me to take those brats with me," she said softly. "Those were your words. Not our children, not my son and daughter. Brats, like they were garbage you were throwing out." I was angry. "I didn't mean, you meant every word, and now you'll live with them." She hung up. 6 months later, Rebecca stood in her new office, Vivian's old office, on the top floor of Meridian Tower. The twins were in the company's newly expanded daycare center, a facility Rebecca had funded specifically for working parents. Patricia was there too, transitioning into a role as the center's director. The company had changed in 6 months. Rebecca had promoted based on merit, implemented transparent review processes, created mentorship programs for employees from disadvantaged backgrounds. She divested from subsidiaries that didn't align with her values and invested in the sustainable technologies. Profit margins were up. Employee satisfaction scores had reached record highs. 3 major publications had written about the mysterious new owner who was revolutionizing corporate culture. Rebecca had hired a PR firm to manage her image, but she'd been clear, no puff pieces, no sympathy stories about the abandoned wife. She wanted to be known for what she built, not what she'd survived. She'd also hired a team of investigators to find other children in foster care who might have family looking for them. She'd created a foundation to help reunite families, to prevent what had happened to her from happening to others. On her desk was a photo of Vivian, one she'd found in the estate files, showing her grandmother at 40, standing in front of the original Meridian factory. She looked tired but determined, building an empire because she didn't know how else to make things right. "I wish I'd known you," Rebecca whispered to the photo. "I wish you'd let me." But she understood now. Sometimes people who'd been hurt deeply didn't know how to reach out. They built walls, built empires, built anything except the relationships that mattered. Rebecca was determined to be different. Her phone buzzed. A text from the lawyer handling David's case. Vanessa testified. "She's taking the immunity deal. Trial should wrap up within a month." Rebecca put the phone down and walked to the window. 47 stories below, people hurried through their lives, unaware that the woman watching them had once been exactly like them. Invisible, struggling, fighting to matter. The difference was she'd never forgotten what that felt like, and she never would. The final confrontation. Eleanor showed up at Meridian Tower unannounced 8 months after everything fell apart. Security called Rebecca's office, asking if they should remove her. "Send her up," Rebecca said. Eleanor looked smaller somehow, diminished by the loss of status and certainty. She walked into Rebecca's office looking around like she couldn't quite believe it was real. "You won," Eleanor said. "Are you happy now?" Rebecca studied the woman who'd called her nothing, who'd sneered at her pain, who'd celebrated her exile. "I'm not happy you're suffering," Rebecca said honestly, "but I'm happy I'm no longer at your mercy. There's a difference. David's bankrupt. The lawsuit is about corporate espionage. Your son and his mistress stole from this company. They would have destroyed thousands of jobs to fund their affair. The legal consequences are appropriate." "He's my child," Eleanor whispered. "How can I make you understand? He's my child." Rebecca thought about Logan and Lily, asleep in the daycare center 3 floors below. "I understand perfectly," she said quietly, "which is why I understand how you should have treated me. The mother of your grandchildren, the woman your son vowed to cherish. If you'd seen me as someone's child, someone who deserved basic dignity, none of this would have happened. You're punishing us for being human, for making mistakes." "No," Rebecca said. "I'm holding you accountable for your choices. There's a difference between making mistakes and building your entire life on cruelty and privilege." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "What do you want from me?" "Nothing," Rebecca said. "I don't need anything from you anymore. But if you want a relationship with Logan and Lily, if you want to be their grandmother, you'll need to prove you've changed. Not with words, with actions, with time, with actually seeing them as people who matter. How long? However long it takes." Eleanor stood there looking older and more uncertain than Rebecca had ever seen her. Finally, she nodded and left without another word. Rebecca didn't know if Eleanor would try or if the entire family would simply fade into the background of her life like painful memories that eventually scar over. But she knew this. She'd built something Vivian never could, a future where power came with responsibility, where children were cherished, where people from nothing could become everything. And that was enough. Epilogue, 3 years later. Logan and Lily were 3 years old, running through the Meridian Tower gardens while Rebecca watched from a bench. They were joined by 12 other children, all from the company daycare, all from different backgrounds, all playing together without knowing or caring about where anyone came from. Meridian Global had become a model for ethical corporate leadership. Rebecca had written a memoir that became a bestseller, though she'd donated all proceeds to foster care reform. She'd been featured in Time magazine, Forbes, and Harvard Business Review. David had served 6 months for corporate espionage and was now working as a sales manager for a mid-sized logistics company. They had a civil co-parenting relationship, though the children spent most of their time with Rebecca. He'd apologized eventually, though Rebecca suspected it was mostly about reducing his legal obligations. Eleanor had, surprisingly, done the work. She'd gone to therapy, volunteered at a women's shelter, and slowly rebuilt a relationship with her grandchildren based on respect rather than obligation. They had dinner together once a month, supervised and cautious, but growing. Michelle had moved to California and stopped posting on Instagram. Gregory had retired to Florida. Nathan had gotten treatment for his issues and was working construction, sending occasional texts asking about the twins. Vanessa had disappeared entirely. Rumors said she'd moved abroad. But Rebecca didn't think about them much anymore. She thought about the future, the company she was building, the children she was raising, the legacy she was creating. She thought about Vivian, the grandmother who'd loved her enough to give her everything, but hadn't loved herself enough to ask for forgiveness. And she thought about the woman she'd been 8 months ago, standing on a rainy sidewalk with 2 newborns, holding everything she owned in 3 cardboard boxes. That woman had been broken, humiliated, thrown away, but she'd also been stronger than anyone knew, including herself. Logan ran over, his face covered in dirt, holding a dandelion. "Mama, for you!" Rebecca took the weed flower and smiled. "Thank you, baby. It's perfect." And it was. Imperfect, unexpected, beautiful precisely because it grew in places no one expected anything to bloom. Just like her. Just like the empire she'd inherited and transformed. Just like the life she'd built from nothing for her children who would never know what it meant to be thrown away. That was her revenge, she realized, not the lawsuits or the terminations or the public humiliation of the family who destroyed her. Her revenge was being happy. Her revenge was thriving. Her revenge was building something so beautiful, so lasting, so meaningful, that everyone who'd called her nothing would spend the rest of their lives knowing exactly what they'd lost. And that crushed them far more thoroughly than any punishment she could have invented. Forever.